Federal agents ramped up immigration enforcement operations over the weekend. ICE reported 950. Meanwhile, federal agents ramped up immigration enforcement operations over the weekend. ICE reported 956 arrests made in total yesterday. That is the Federal agents ramped up immigration enforcement operations over the weekend. ICE reported 956 arrests made in total yesterday. That is the largest number of arrests in a single day by the Trump administration to date. The operations targeted several cities across the country, with federal law enforcement agencies in multiple communities posting about assisting with immigration efforts. In Denver, the DEA says it targeted members of the Tren de Aragua Venezuelan gang. In Chicago, ICE carried out what it called enhanced targeted operations. Trump border czar Tom Homan was there to oversee the effort. Since President Trump was inaugurated last Monday, ICE has made at least 2,681 arrests. Let's go live to Chicago and NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, you spoke to Trump border czar Tom Homan yesterday as the immigration roundups were taking place. What did he tell you?
Hi there, Mika. Good morning. Well, no surprise. He said it was a successful operation. And over the last few days, we have seen this ramped up enforcement effort really across the country, but also the Trump administration really wanting to publicize this. I guess no surprise. But before, during the Biden administration, we did not get a daily tally of how many arrests ICE had made nationwide. Now we are getting it each day. As you mentioned, nearly 1,000 arrests yesterday and more than 2,600 since President Trump took office. Now, Chicago, of course, this is the city where Tom Homan had previously said would be ground zero for mass deportations. It's, again, no surprise that he's here just several days after President Trump taking office. And at one point, he got into a feud with local officials who may have threatened to perhaps impede ICE agents, although they've since backed off of that and said that they don't plan to get in the way of any ICE agents. But Tom Homan said, has repeatedly said, that he would prosecute local officials here or anywhere else if they got in the way.
But Chicago is a sanctuary city, and it's a target-rich environment. We know a lot of illegal aliens live here. We know we don't have access to Cook County Jail, one of the biggest jails in the country. And I'll say it again: if the politicians, the mayor and the governor would just simply work with us and let us in that jail, to arrest a bad guy in jail is safer for the officer, it's safer for the alien, it's safer for the community. I don't get it.
Do you plan, under certain circumstances, to go into churches and schools at some point?
I'll never say never. If there's a national security threat that we know is in a certain place, on a college campus, well, we're going to get that national security threat. If he's a significant public safety threat that's in what we used to call a central location, no, we're going to enforce the law.
And that policy is different from the Biden administration. Mika, of course, ICE now allowing its agents to go into those sensitive locations like schools and churches. But, Mika, I should also point out the Trump administration has sometimes made it seem as if they're beginning this deportation process from scratch. But we should point out that during the Biden administration, especially during the last year, they had ramped up deportations, and ICE made arrests nationwide really throughout the Biden administration. We went on one of their operations just last month. The difference is now the numbers in the last several days, at least in the latter half of last week, do seem significantly higher. It'll be interesting to see if this is sustained in the coming weeks and months ahead. Tom Homan says that he needs more funding from Congress in order to keep ramping up these mass deportation plans, Mika.
Good morning, Gabe. It's Jonathan. Good context there. We know that the Biden administration also did some of these raids. Talk to us a little more about just the jump here from the Trump team, but also what do they hope to do next? Because that's always been the tension point. They said the first wave would be criminals, people who committed violent crimes. But we've also heard rhetoric from those in the administration, including Stephen Miller, who was the architect of this whole program, that suggests that eventually the targets will be people whose only crimes were to enter the United States illegally.
Yeah, and look, if you talk to Tom Homan, he says that no one should be in this country illegally. And I asked him yesterday, were there collateral arrests yesterday? And what collateral arrest means is essentially when these ICE agents go on one of these operations and they are searching for an immigrant with a criminal record. In the process of that, they may run across other immigrants who don't have violent records. During previous administrations, the Biden administration specifically, collateral arrests didn't happen quite so often. But now the Trump administration is saying that there will be collateral arrests. The question is just how many. And Jonathan, as you point out, what about the detention beds? Is there enough detention space in this country? Tom Homan has repeatedly said there isn't. Right now, there are about 40,000 beds or so nationwide. He wants to have more than 100,000. Of course, that requires a lot of funding from Congress. ICE is already facing a $230 million budget shortfall. But what is different here is not only the increased rhetoric, the increased publicizing of these numbers, but also what Tom Homan said to me is the biggest difference is now the partnership from other federal agencies. As part of the operation yesterday, it wasn't just ICE. There was, as you mentioned, the DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshal's Office is involved in some of these, and also the DOD now using those military aircraft to deport some of these immigrants around the world. Jonathan?
So, Gabe, I'm sure, Joe here, Gabe, I'm sure some Americans listening to what Tom Homan was telling you would ask themselves, why wouldn't Chicago officials allow law enforcement officers to go into prisons and get illegal immigrants with violent criminal records and send them back to their home countries? Do you have any insight on if that is happening, why that is happening, what the justification is of Chicago or Illinois officials?
It's actually very interesting, Joe. And Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday, we have seen a sort of a little bit of a change in the rhetoric with some Democratic officials here. They've backed off some of their tough talk against the Trump administration, making that exact point that they agree that immigrants with criminal records should be deported. But some of the further left politicians, not just in this city but others, they say they don't want to cooperate with ICE at all. With the question of jails, Joe, there's a program called the 287G program, and that's something that is already in place. It has been for years, and certain sheriff's departments and other law enforcement agencies locally take part in it. It allows local law enforcement to partner with ICE and essentially deputize those local officials to help enforce immigration law inside jails. Stephen Miller and the Trump administration have said that they plan to ramp up that program specifically. And it will, again, be interesting to see how many of local officials essentially agree to that and try to get some of the more violent criminals out of here, because they realize politically that is something that this country voted for. Donald Trump ran on immigration, and many of his voters can say that they want those violent criminals out of there. And as Jonathan mentioned, though, the question will be how many collateral arrests will there be moving forward? Will there be the detention bed space for that? And how soon before the Trump administration moves in that direction? Joe, Mika, and Jonathan.
All right, NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, thank you.